Hi, I'm Michelle Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them. Hey, and welcome to Hey, I Want Your Job. And today I have somebody whose job you could not pay me enough to do your job. And I say that with love. Deven, what is your job title?
My job title is product manager at Amazon in the customer service division, or customer engagement technology, CET. It's so big, so we have different departments, but that's the one I work in.
Okay, so can I just say that with that job title, to people on the outside, makes it sound like you make 60K and you're like, I'm in charge of this product for like 5 things. So would you please tell us, what do you actually do at Amazon, and give some context?
Sure. I mean, Amazon's so big, right? Like it's so massive, so much scale. So I actually run a platform within Amazon called Converse. And the idea is that we want to enable conversational interactions with customers. So to put in perspective, if you've ever used the mobile app or the website, and if you've gone to customer service and if you've chatted with the bot and you've said, hey, I need to return my order, or like, where is my thing, my kid's like birthday gift, or if you've called the 1-800 number in the US, you will also get the voice bot, which is a little robotic, and it's like, hello, how are you? What is your need?
I am familiar.
Yeah, so the voice bot and the chat bot, they both run on this platform that I manage called Converse. And we probably see like maybe 10 million contacts a week. And just to kind of clarify the word contact, right? Because there's so many, definitions of it. In the customer service domain, contact is anytime a customer actually contacts customer service. And usually in some places they create a record for you, and it might go into some CRM, or it might go into all these other places. But that contact record is really important to companies because they use that to figure out like what defects there are, like where to improve customer experience. And they use that in so many other parts of their company. But a contact is very key piece of data used throughout the company.
Okay, well, that was the most boring description of what you do I think you could possibly have come up with. Well done, Deven. Well done. So in reality, what I heard from that was that every time I want to punch Amazon in the face because of being annoyed with their initial bot engagement, that really I should come and punch you in the face because really it's your fault. That's what I heard. Is that is that the truth? Okay.
That is the truth. That is the truth. And you know what? I've actually punched myself in the face a couple of times when the bot did not do, or when I didn't understand like where the heck my package was. So I think it's a universal human reaction. So it's okay. And I punch myself all the time when it doesn't work.
So I guess my first big question, we've heard like in the media all about how nothing is going to be here in time for Christmas if you don't order yesterday. Which means that here in about 60 days, you're going to be the most hated man in North America. You're welcome. Right? Because everybody's going to have ordered their shit for Prime for Christmas. And they're going to be like, what do you mean I'm ordering on Black Friday and it won't be here until January 2nd? What are you guys at Amazon already freaked out about this? And can you give me any indication as to the fact what the plan is so that we don't all wind up hating you more than everything?
So I will go with the line that pretty much I've gotten from everybody else in every other business I've talked to. It's supply chain, right? Like there's acres and acres with cars that are like half, completely finished, brand new cars, but they don't have the whatever semiconductor or some chip. So a lot of it is going to come down to supply chain, right? There's some pallet or some, crate from China or Malaysia, and there's nothing Amazon can do at that point, right? You're just kind of waiting, right? So that's, I think, a big part of it. But I think we made it through the pandemic last year, right? I'd say
y'all rocked the pandemic. That's how we got the penis rocket. Like he made plenty of money on the pandemic.
Hey, that was his time to shine, I guess. For me, I joined Amazon literally the week 16, March 16, so week 12 of 2020. That was the week when we officially went into the pandemic. I think I was the first class new hire orientation class within Amazon where we did it completely remote. So, and I remember the very first day I started, we had like what we do is these quarterly business reviews, QBRs, right? So you have like VPs and multiple levels of VPs and directors. And I remember the first thing they said is like, we have like all this capacity for customer service, and there was like maybe like 50% of our capacity globally was just shut down, right? Because something like in the Philippines you have call center shut down, in India you have call center shut down. So like I walked into Amazon and that was like my first day. I was like, what the hell is going on here? This is crazy, right? So
Yeah.
And since then, I think to make it through that year where everything was just like it made us rethink, how do we think about customer service, right? Like a lot of times you're scared to like do something that might hurt the customer experience. But kind of when all bets are off, like when the gloves are off and everybody's like, look, there's no playbook for this now. In some ways, I thought it was the most interesting time to be at Amazon, because now you can say, you know what, now we can do these crazy things that maybe normally only a startup would think about doing. But now we have no other option. We're going to try these things. So
tell me, what crazy shit did you do? What crazy did you bring to the party, Deven?
I mean, part of it was like, I mean, Amazon is a larger company, so they're going to be risk averse in most places, right? But I think
time out. Amazon is the 5th largest company on the planet, and you just said they're a larger company. Really? You hear yourself when you talk?
Yeah. Okay, so they're larger, but like large doesn't always mean you're risk averse, right? But no, sometimes large does, right? Like for them being larger, they're like, they've gone, like there are many areas where you have to be risk averse, right? So for them, like customer service is one of those areas where it's like, you do not want to mess up the customer experience, right? So for a long time, that might make you weary of trying some new things that you're not sure if it's going to like mess up the customer experience or not. But I think when COVID happened, at that point, you're just like, we're going to do whatever it takes to like keep things like running. And for them, I think that's when Amazon was already doing a lot in machine learning, but they said, you know what, we're going to go all in on bots and automation, because that was one of the things that I think really did help us, because, even if you hire hundreds and thousands of customer support agents, when something like the pandemic happens, like all bets are off, right? So I think there was a lot, and there's still a lot we are doing, but yeah, it was a crazy time. And you're right, they are big, but they need to like think and be nimble too, which we're trying.
Well, and I think, so I obviously think about everything in the world from the world of recruitment, right? So I have a totally different perspective. And I know that I'm friends with a recruiter for Amazon who is extremely noisy, prevalent, I guess. And I've asked her on your behalf, but also on behalf of other people, why the hell can't hiring managers and good candidates connect via Amazon? And I know that one of the frustrations that you and other managers that I work with at Amazon have expressed is that it's very non-transparent internally, and that it suffers a little bit from big corporate syndrome when it comes to things like recruitment and that sort of thing. So that being said, how did you get into Amazon? Did somebody connect you? Did you just apply and went through the process like every other normal Joe? Or were they like, oh my God, Deven, have you met Deven? Could we get him?
It was totally luck. Like, I'll tell you, you know what? And it happened so haphazardly, right? Like, I'll tell you this, right? Like, I mean, we haven't talked about this part yet, but I had been running my own startup for 4 years, right? And I think I was coming into the tail end where, we just weren't able to raise that kind of like big round, like $1 million, $2 million to like keep going. We had to raise some small rounds, we had some traction, but really wasn't there. And for me, I had been doing startups now for like almost 15 years, right? Big companies, small companies, smaller-esque, right? And for me, I was like, you know what, my risk tolerance was totally changing, right? Like, 2 little kids, right? I was like, I just can't keep doing this. I felt like I was putting a lot of strain on so many areas of my life. So, I started looking around, right? And I had applied to so many different places, just randomly, right? You just see something on LinkedIn, you kind of, talk to somebody. And honestly, it was totally out of the blue, because this was, I think, in 2019, and Anita and I, my wife, we were really kind of set on like going back to Canada for a while, because
we almost lost you. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, like I was supposed to go to Canada, and the only reason I ever applied to Amazon was there was a position in Toronto, and there was some position. I was like, oh, why not? I had never really thought about Amazon before that, only because it was so big, and I didn't know. Like I just most of it was in Seattle, right? So I think this is pre-pandemic, which seems so crazy, but back then it's like we weren't. I had lived in Seattle. I did not want to move back to Seattle, right? So I think for me, Toronto was just like, okay, let's try it. And then one thing happened was I think the Toronto position, their sister team was in Seattle, kind of, or the mother team, I guess you could say, because the main group was in Seattle. And instead of the Toronto position, there was one in Seattle. And at that point, we're like, oh, so totally random, just applied, right? And I think they get so many applicants, and they probably have like some filters or some, like, they just have lots of people, where honestly some random person called me. She probably called 100 other people, and I picked up. I just happened to pick up my phone that day, and she's like, hey, like, are you interested? And I was like, okay. So so we started the rounds then, and eventually, like, my wife and I were kind of jazzed, like, okay, maybe Seattle could work. It's close to the other family in Portland. So the whole thing was totally out of left field, because I think I was not thinking in that direction at all, because of like how geographically constrained the job market was.
Mm-hmm.
I did forget to mention that there was one aspect that really helped my application, I think, go bubble to the top within Amazon. So I did have a friend from business school, and that friend was working at Amazon Seattle. And I do remember that he said he was going to reach out to a lot of the hiring managers, right? And then I'd sent him like a cover letter and a resume and a few other things. So I think like having that inside ping to a hiring manager potentially helped, right? I don't know how much it played a part, but I was very grateful that he did do that. So I think like if there's anybody in your network that works at Amazon, like I know I've done that too. I've used that same how you say recipe for anybody else that's applying within Amazon. I'll ask them to find like 5 job positions that they're interested in. Give me a resume, maybe a cover letter, and then I kind of try to send a personal note to those hiring managers. So I think that did go a long ways, and I think that helped me at least get into the interview loop.
Nice. So you went through then 9,000 rounds of interview minimum, right? And 6 months of your life, walked the gauntlet, hot coals with no socks, etc. Finally, FANG offer, which obviously you make at least $1 zillion a year if all of the internet rumors are to be believed, right? Then you met Jeff Bezos personally. He welcomed you into the folds. You guys had lunch, That's how it all went down. Is that basically the gist of it from there?
I wish, and but as a side thing, like when I did intern at Microsoft, I did get to go to Bill Gates's house and actually have dinner, which was cool. But Bezos had no space exploration offers for me. So
you didn't make it on the penis rocket. That sucks, Deven. I feel like you would have been a value add in that environment. I'm not going to lie. Comedy gold.
Like that's not a compliment.
So I have a few questions in a couple of different paths. I know you're surprised I would have a lot of questions. My first one is kind of really directly related to you. One of the things that I get asked a lot, and I know the answer that I give to people, but I want to hear your answer, is that people who want to move up into the sort of the area that you are, right, the more senior customer experience, they have a hard time understanding how to get the base and like where the difference is between customer service, customer experience, and then how to parlay, like how do you then become the guy that oversees the customer experience for Amazon's bots? Like, so can you just speak to that a little bit? Like for you, where is the difference between customer service and customer experience, and how would you ideally like to see candidates bridging those gaps?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think there's part of it which is like, is it also like how do you move from customer service into more product management?
Yep, all of that.
Because the thing I realize is that product management is not that different, right? Whether you're building an app to, I don't know, find taxi cabs, or whether you're building it for customer service, right? And I think that's usually the skills that a lot of these companies look for, is like that core kind of product management background or skill set, and then you can apply it to different places. Now, I think if you have it for the domain of customer service, it's even better, right? Especially when you're thinking about customer experience. But like, I like to think about, okay, different frameworks, right? And I will say that there's, like when I was doing grad school here at UT, there's a lot of people that want to go from whatever field, right? Engineering or maybe even finance or some other field, right? And they want to go into product management. And I think the advice that I like to give them is that, you know, being a product manager is not that difficult, right? Like it's just another job, right? But it is a specialized job, right? Like today, if I went and just wanted to go be, you know, a finance person or a hedge fund manager, like I couldn't do it. I don't have the skills. Product management, I think, is easier to get the skills to do, but there are certain things you need to know, right? And one of the things I like to always tell people is, well, because a lot of people come from, let's say, engineering background, they do the MBA, they check the box and they say, okay, I want to be a product manager now. Give me my product management job. And what I tell them is like, it doesn't work like that, right? Like, I think the people that become great product managers, they usually have two things that I found that like work like really well in their favor. One is they have customer empathy, right? And I think early on, like even from my very first job, I felt like I didn't know it at the time, but I felt like I was interested in the tech stuff, but I think the side that really pulled me was like seeing customers struggle and seeing them like have problems, and I really like gravitated towards that, right? So there has to be some side of you that's really empathetic to the customer and kind of like thinks about that a lot, or wants to focus on that. And then the other side of it is being able to be scrappy and launch things, right? Like I've seen so many really smart people that are like, hey, I can create this Excel or create this PowerPoint. And those are tools and those are things that help you. But end of the day, like I think some of the best product managers are the ones that like are able to say, look, I had like really no idea how to tackle this, but I tried a bunch of shit, right? I launched a Google form, I gathered some data, I figured out what people wanted, I kind of categorized it, right? Those things to me always tell me like, okay, this person has the potential to be a really great product manager. And I think a lot of people miss that, especially like, and it often happens with really smart people that are really good at engineering or science or something else like that. And to me, those are the two basic things. And the other parts you can learn, right? Like user experience, data science, the business stuff, the technical stuff. If you have those aspects, those are great. Like they help you even more. But to me, they're not the seedling of what makes a great product manager. So I'll pause there. Like,
anytime you want to be my client and have me recruit for you, you just say the word, because that is so much infinitely easier than any of my clients ever feel. So they're all like, oh, wait, you're a product marketing manager, but you haven't done almost exactly this product, which by the way is unique in the market. Oh, no, basically you're dead to me. What? I literally had a hiring manager today tell me that I gave him a candidate for as a PMM, which I know is a little bit like adjacent to PM, but you know,
yeah.
And she has 7 years of experience. She's thebomb.com. She's amazing. And I was like, you are welcome for this candidate. He was like, eh. What do you mean, eh? She's an MBA from Wharton. She has 7 years in industry. What in the hell do you want if not this chick, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, I mean, she really have 7 years? Because the 2 where she was at Macy's, those don't count. And that is my life as a recruiter, to give you some insight. So to hear you say, product management is product management, bring it. Like, I like scrappy and outside the box thinkers. That is like every decent recruiter's dream. So you win award for best potential hiring manager ever for a recruiter right there.
And you know what, the truth is, I wish it wasn't that way, right? Because like I think that's why I've often gravitated towards startups, because there's no playbook in the startup world, right? Like I agree, like big companies, right? Consulting or finance, or like you have to be this very particular thing. But I think what happens is like they don't know what's coming next. So what happens is a company like Stripe or Uber disrupts them because they're like, oh, we didn't know. And I really like that aspect of like startups, because they don't think about things in that way. They look for smart people that are like super passionate and they're driven. And the sad part is that like 99.9% of startups fail, but the ones that make it, where they kind of come together, you know, they were people that were not even in that industry, right? And I think that's how I often think about things. If you give me like smart, passionate people that care, they can do a way more damage, or they can be way more effective than like the person that has the exact SAP plus HubSpot experience, blah, 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 right?
See, and that's so funny because I recruit for a lot of startups, and yet you could not pay me enough to work for a startup. Like there's not an amount of equity. There's not an amount of base. Like it would just be a hard no. The entire culture of let's build the plane while we're flying it, frenetic, like sure, just do some shit and ask for forgiveness later. That is anathema to every part of my being. Like I am lady organized fun is more fun than regular fun, right? Like I can't. And all of my startup clients are like, you're so awesome. Would you think of going in-house? I would, when you are no longer a startup. Call me in 15 years and we'll chat.
So you're
right
more
now
organized. I like to see all the pieces laid out, right?
Einstein hires the people. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's totally how I am. I can't with like the crazy process. So in recruitment, I find that one of the things that people bitch about recruiters all the time, usually with a lot of cause. And one of the reasons that you get really bad recruiters is because they don't have really good processes. Lack of a strong process results in all of the shit that people hate. You get rushed off your feet and so people get ghosted. You don't have something in place so that they at least get an auto reject or something like that to give them some kind of an indication. You take a crappy rec on at the beginning. And so that means that they see 3 candidates go, what were these guys? That's not what I wanted. So now you really do have to change the rec, and that pisses candidates off. Like all of the things that people complain about recruiters are either because the recruiter involved is just not very good, which definitely is not a small percentage, or they don't have any decent processes in place. And so, yes, that is part of why recruitment is my joy place, because it is all about things you can measure and processes you can create and be consistent. I have a feeling that is not an area you would thrive in, but it works for me.
It is, yeah, it's a tougher area for me, right, in that regard.
Consistency is, yeah. So, which I think is part of what's so interesting about you as a manager. And when you think about, you know, technology, because people think of anytime you have a role that's vaguely technology related, people make a lot of assumptions about the character of the people involved with that. And one of my favorite things about you is I feel like you break all of those molds, right? Like you're like the goofy frat boy in the office who happens to work in a technical capacity, which I think is delightful. Do you see that those sort of basic assumptions and stereotypes are changing more broadly? Are you the exception to the rule, or do you think that that stereotype is just simply outdated?
No, I think so I think the stereotype is changing, right? Like,
there's geek chic.
Yeah. I think so. Okay, so let me rewind, right? Like, I think in some ways I'm very unique and anomaly, right? Because I do love coding, right? Like, there's nothing better than like sometimes sitting and cranking. Like, I think in college, one of my good friends who's very successful now in his career, I think we spent like 45 hours straight working on our compiler, right? Like straight, like no sleep, never left the building. We were just in the zone, right? And it was a tough thing, right? We didn't do, and this is back then when you had to go to these big buildings and do it, right? But then the other weird thing is like my entire MBA class, they did like the Myers-Briggs, and like me and I think one other woman, we were like on the most extreme end of extrovert, right? So you don't see that often where you have like, and I do love both of those things, right? I know those are tendencies, right? Myers-Briggs, but for me, it's like, I was the social chair for my fraternity, right? I did throw these big parties and have a great time. But at the same time, I love to just like be left alone and just, if I'm working on a problem, like the worst thing is we call it building a glass house. I'm building like this glass structure and like a kid runs in or one of my kids or somebody bothers me, the whole thing falls apart and like you lose your concentration. And I kind of can go on both of those extremes, right? I will say that the tech stereotype is changing a little bit because tech is becoming so more prevalent, right? I think it used to be like more esoteric, like coder, tech nerds like myself as well. But now I think computer science has become like the new algebra, right? I know in schools, right, they teach it. Like my son went to Code Ninja's coding camp, and it's kind of like something that you just do, right? And you kind of are exposed to, even if you don't like it, right? In the same way you're exposed to maybe soccer or whatever. So I think it's more like mainstream now, which is a good thing, right? So it is breaking the stereotypes. But I do think for me, like it depends. You got to find what you like. Like I definitely like, that's why I like product management more. I had to specialize at a bigger company. But one of the things that I do love is I love coding and working on problems as well as doing the business side. And the truth is big companies don't want you to do that. They want you to be one or the other, right? So that's just
until you get to a certain point, and then they really want you to be both, right? Like that's always the thing. So like my husband works in technology, as you may be aware. And one of the things that he's been told repeatedly is, oh, you're an enterprise architect or you're a principal architect. But you're not going to get that next role without an MBA, my friend. And like, because they want you to have like the business qualifications as well, which I have my own opinion on how insane I think that is. We have a tendency, I think, right now in the market, like I think it's slid over the last few years where we expect everybody to be everything.
Yeah.
Like the whole unicorn candidate phenomenon, like they can't be equally good Python, Java, C#, and JavaScript coders. They can't. Some of those things are mutually contradictory. Like you can't do that. And yet I can't tell you how many recs I've seen out there that are like, you need to be an expert on all of these things. That's just dumb. Yeah. That's just somebody who's like, why not? Just put everything on there and hope for the best. So I do think that there is like an element right now, particularly in the market, of like people wanting everything. So for your team, since you are not a douchebag hiring manager, we're going to lay that out right now. How do you get around? Not a douchebag. Woohoo! How do you approach hiring differently so that you do wind up getting people presented to you that come from interesting backgrounds, that have tried different things, that are, just smart, capable people?
I think it's for coding. You're right. Nobody's going to know all the different languages, right? But there are people that are really good at picking up new languages, right? If you know one really well, right? So I think it's more about depth in one area, right? So if I'm ever hiring or interviewing engineers or even UX designers, right? It's really about going deep, right? The people that can go really deep, they tend to be some of the fastest learners and the people that want to try new things. Now, I think with Quado, when I was hiring, right, like I didn't really have the funds, right? So I was definitely going to many hiring events. I went to like many general assembly, I tried to do intern projects. And I think one of the things I found out was somebody who was hungry, that really wanted to learn. And sometimes they came from totally different industries. I think, one person that I had worked with came from like the insurance industry, and he went to like a general assembly boot camp, and he kind of upskilled himself. And those kinds of things showed a lot of grit. So kind of coming back to like the Angela Duckworth, that what we want for our kids around is grit, right? That resilience. Like, how do you have somebody who says, long-term, I'm going to invest in something, even though it's hard, and keep doing it, right? That is something that I think is really important, right? And it could be, a lot of times you get some of the Wharton or some of the best like Ivy League schools, and you get a lot of kids with grit that go through that, right? Because it took a lot just to get there, but it's not necessarily there, right? So I think like being able to tease out like what is actual grit and willing, like passion to do something versus what is just they know this one language, you know, okay, and they're kind of good with that, right? Trying to separate that is tricky, I'd say.
So when you're communicating your needs, because obviously you have a team that you hire for, when you are communicating those to your recruiter and going through that process, how do you articulate to the recruiter, look, I'm not your typical hiring manager. Please don't feel like you have to bring me a one-to-one. If you bring me a shining superstar who is close-ish, but worth a punt, I want to know. Like, how do you say that to your average FANG recruiter? Keeping in mind that I have like 15 of them in my contacts at your company, and you know, they'll be watching this. No, I'm just teasing. I mean, all of those things are true, but just also.
Honestly, I wish I did more hiring. Like the thing is, like when you get to FANG, right? They're so big and they're so specialized. Like, so for the engineering side, right? Like the engineering manager, he's going out to recruiting events. They're getting so many people kind of coming in, and they go to these like
Oh yeah,
hiring events that I'm honestly pretty far removed from hiring the engineering side, right? Like I think we had one PM intern join our team, and I think she was doing her MBA at Sloan or something, and I wasn't even part of that process, right? She came in, she was great. So the PM side, like I think, to give you an example, like the group I work in, right, probably like 500-600 people. I think I only knew 2 product management interns that we had. So we don't hire that many product management interns. There's a lot more engineering interns. But a lot of them come from these hiring events, like the same way that I got my internship at Microsoft, right? They come to campus, they do like a series of interviews. They probably have like 1,000 people they go through, and they're probably like there's maybe like 100 of them that they say, okay, let's fly these folks up and do like deeper dives. But I don't know how it works from like experienced hires as much, right?
Okay. So one of the things that I think is interesting about what you just said is that it was all her with the pronoun for the intern. Your FANG has gotten a lot of flack lately about women in technology and underrepresentation. So I guess first of all, in your personal experience, do you see that on the teams? Like, oh yeah, there's nothing but a bunch of dudes here? Or do you think that that's not your personal experience? Like what is your take on that? Do they deserve it?
There. It's definitely still there, right? I will say that like one of the things that really made me appreciate and love my team, and like one of the things that I really love about Amazon is my team, the people I work with, right? And I will say I have an amazing female manager, right? And I think her manager has done an amazing job like cultivating this diverse group of really like caring, empathetic people. And one of the things that I was really worried about taking the job at Amazon, right? Because you hear the horror stories and they're true because I've talked to people in some of these groups, right? Yeah. Other, you know, friends of mine that are in these like crazy parts within Amazon. But through some back channeling, I had kind of heard a little bit about this group I was joining, and it's kind of like this special bright spot, right? And I think I'm super impressed, and I think that's one of the things that keeps me really excited is that like they breathe it, and it's not just like 1 or 2. I think like 4 or 5 levels up, I can see it, and I think that I can't speak for the rest of Amazon, but I can say that I'm really impressed with what they're thinking about. There's obviously more they can do. And to give you some perspective, we have, let's say, I think around 7 engineers on the engineering team that I manage. 3 of them are female, right? I mean, that's a pretty good. We're almost at 50-50, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really proud because I think our team is stronger because of that, right? The different diverse perspectives and how they work together. So, and even within the 500-600 kind of person, organization I'm in, I don't think it's like that for other engineering teams as well. So I'm very cognizant of that. And I want to make sure that it continues to thrive that way. But I definitely see what you're saying across Amazon, that's not the norm. And I don't know, like me in my one little area, how to help, right? I try with what I can do, but I think it's a tough problem to solve. And I think there needs to be really like courageous leaders do it. So I'll pause there. Like that's kind of my thoughts so far.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So then the other question I have is actually more of a personal one. And it is not, are you a sexist pig? Because that answer is no, if anybody is wondering. Your lovely wife would never allow that to be the case. But one of the questions I get from candidates all the time who have South Asian names, and I don't know if anybody told you, but you're brown. But people, especially with South Asian names, that there is they get a lot of discrimination, and people born and bred in the US and Canada, like yourself, like your wife, that still like, oh, they see the name and they assume that they need a visa sponsorship or that kind of thing. First of all, have you experienced that personally that you're aware of? And second of all, what is your take on where that sits right now?
That's a tough one, right? Like I have not experienced that myself, right? And maybe it's because, when they see the name on a resume, maybe they don't put it together. I don't know. But also there's that checkbox, right? But do hiring managers see that checkbox that says, do you need a visa sponsorship? They never see that, right?
Not supposed to. But a lot of companies don't have that, right? Or they have that at a stage further down, that the initial is just sending in your resume. And I know personally a number of recruiters who make assumptions about people with South Asian names, which is racist and bullshit for the record. But also I know that it happens. But so that's interesting that you have not been aware of or seen that happening in like hiring manager discussions and that sort of thing. Because I always find it interesting that if I put a candidate forward whose name is Bob Smith, nobody ever asks me if they need sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
If I put a candidate over whose last name is Singh, every time they're going to ask me if they need sponsorship. Even if they're like, went to the University of Kansas, graduated from like high school in Missouri, like, nope, they're still going to ask just because of the name. And I get so frustrated. Like I said, I have candidates who ask me all the time, like, I'm sure I'm being rejected because people just make assumptions. What do I do about it? So it's very interesting to me that I wonder if you haven't heard it in the room because you have a South Asian name, or I wonder if, the whole like, and we don't make the Black people jokes in front of Black people kind of thing, or if it is that you've lucked out and worked only places that that's not a thing. Do you have a gut check on either of those options?
I think the bigger companies, like all the resumes and all the applications I've submitted, right, have always asked that question, right? But I think you're coming at it from a recruiter angle where you're sending in resumes before like candidate even fills out a form, right? So I think it is a different dynamic, right? I will say, I think I've either worked at companies that were too big, Microsoft or Amazon, where they're definitely asking that, and in terms of asking it the way the equal opportunity employment, right, laws dictate, but then they don't ever look at that really when they're hiring, right? Like it's not something that's ever factored in because, the truth is these big companies, they I don't think worry about it also because they get enough H-1Bs. They're not worried about that, right? They're like, we want the best candidates, the best people, and we kind of go forward. Or I've worked at places that were so small that they're like, look, we obviously cannot even sponsor you. We're like a 7-person company, right? Like either, so I've been on one end of the spectrum or the other. And I think the middle is probably where more of that comes in, right? To tell you the truth. But it is definitely true. Like I have so many friends that I went to grad school with or undergrad, and they had to go to big companies, right? They had to go to Dell or Microsoft or wherever, or Oracle, because they could not work at a startup because they knew they couldn't get sponsored. And it sucked, right? Because a lot of them were like super passionate about it. They wanted to work at a smaller place, maybe even start their own, but they couldn't, right? So it is definitely a tough situation. And I do think that's where I would say like more people that need sponsorship gravitate towards bigger companies. And then I think that becomes a self-fulfilling where because you have more that need sponsorship to come to bigger companies, I think you do get more of that stereotype unconsciously, maybe that's there, even though I've never seen it like in a direct way in any loops that I've been in or any situations. I think just companies up there, like they're not worried about it because they're like, look, we want to hire the best in that regard.
That actually gives me some heart, but I think also we'll talk offline about some of those companies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's very interesting. So how did you didn't wake up one morning and go, you know what I want to be when I grow up? Because we're old, Deven. I don't know if you got the memo, but we are. And so when I know, same. But when we were kids, Amazon did not exist, right? So there was not like, as a small boy, you were like, Amazon. One day I'm going to work for a man who flies in a penis rocket. Like that was not a thing for you. So at what point in your career did you think, you know, it will be super fun? Some product management, bring it on. Like, how did that happen?
You know what? I took I'd say a 10-year detour getting to it, and I'll blame it on one multiple choice checkbox. So I tell you what, I went to college at UC San Diego, right? So, you know, I'm enjoying life in the basement of this computer science building while everybody else is surfing, and, you know, but I'm still having a good time. And Microsoft had come on a campus, and I think I was a sophomore, and you go through these interviews, and I did well, right? And then I think they were going to fly me up to Seattle. But I specifically remember there was this one form, and it had 3 check boxes. It's developer in test, developer in something else, or maybe it's just a software developer, and then one is program manager. And you just had to pick which one you wanted, right? And I had no idea. I picked the first checkbox. Literally, I picked the first checkbox. I was like, I don't know any of these things. And it was software developer and test, right? So here I joined the test. I'm a developer, but I'm in SharePoint version 1. Version 2.
I can't imagine you a test. I can't. Oh my God.
Yeah. I will say this though. So I'm still a developer, so I'm liking it, right? I'm doing a bunch of I'm building test suites to test these APIs, and for version 1 and 2 of SharePoint. I remember server health was my thing, so I had to build these test suites to check the health of the server, right? Which is some whatever old school stuff, right? So then I graduate, I come back to this team, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm writing some code. It's interesting, but I was like, wait, what are these program manager people doing? I was like, I want to do kind of, but
those guys get to go talk to people. I want to talk to people.
But here's what happened, right? I was the most, even as the first year student coming out, the freshie, right? Coming into the team, I was so jazzed about working with our clients. I remember because SharePoint was still a startup in a big company, right? So I remember I think Boeing or some other companies in Seattle were we're trying to get them to use SharePoint, right? And I was like, hey, let's make sure our APIs work, because they're going to want to do all these workflows, right? Boeing has I don't know, a jet where something happens and something else, somebody else has to review a document. So I remember building a bunch of stuff on these APIs, and for whatever reason, the management was this guy really likes doing stuff that the customers want. So they sent me to the Microsoft SharePoint conference, or DevCon, I think. I probably have a shirt or something for it, right? And this was in 2004, right? And so they send me this fresh guy, out there. And that's when I kind of realized, I really like doing the customer stuff. I like listening to, and then there's all these customers, right? There's the SharePoint or the Windows, Microsoft developer conference, and they're all basically bitching and complaining about stuff. But I was eating it up. I was like, oh, we definitely got to fix this. We got to fix that. You're right. This other thing sucks. This API is so slow. So I think that's what really made me realize that I like doing a lot of stuff with customers. And I remember coming back to Microsoft and kind of giving my report on all these things we should fix, right? Hey, and I was super jazzed about it. I was super pumped, right? And then I remember one of the GPM or whoever, the director of product, and basically we had, in some way, he was just you know what? He's we're not going to do any of that. He's we're the 900-pound gorilla, and we're going to do the minimum to take over the market, and then we're just going to stay there. And I remember coming out of that, and I was just this is why I need to go work at a startup. I need to get out of Microsoft. And I think I left, and I felt a little bummed, because I felt SharePoint, I mean, it was a huge success within Microsoft. And I think if career-wise, it probably would have been great, right? To kind of ride that. I think a lot of other people within Microsoft like well, the SharePoint, like version 1, version 2, it kind of grew really fast and taking that expertise within the company. But I think to me, that was like, it was both like really exciting to see like something grow so fast that I had worked on, right, within a big company. And it was also kind of deflating to see like how much like Microsoft didn't really care about the customer in that way. They're just like, whatever, right? So it eventually pushed me to startups, which eventually let me do like real product management and these other like cross-functional things, which helped me realize that I do like being the product manager at the end of the day. But I would say it was kind of this long, like very convoluted road. When if I would have just checked the third box, which is program management, I would have probably been an intern in program management on SharePoint from the get-go. And who knows, maybe I would be like VP of like, I don't know, whatever, at whatever big tech company, right? But so you definitely
a lowly PM at some little nobody company that,
right.
you know.
So, you know, you never know.
Your life is hard, Deven. Remind me to cry for you later.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like how convoluted the road can be. Right?
Yeah. Well, and Microsoft and the naughties were like known for being uber douches. Like that was when they were perfecting the like pretending to be nice so that you will never leave model, right? Like, because that was when I was recruiting for Microsoft, but in the UK, and they were like, people were like, "Oh, did you hear? They have free McDonald's." I was like, "Yes, they do. They'll also do your dry cleaning and change your tires. You should go there. There's no need to leave, not ever." And people were like, "Oh, but wait." And they're like, "Yes, bring your dog to the office. That's fine. We have dog walkers. You don't need to go home to let your dog out. Stay. Let us bring you free food." Oh my God. It was so insidious. And like, nobody wanted to work there for more than like a hot minute because of it. And it's, like such a dumpster fire. I'm told that they have learned the error of their ways. I'm told that they are now once again reasonable human beings to work for and with. But like you were there in the dark times, Deven. So well done, my friend. Hats off. That's when my husband was there too. It was that same kind of time period. And he was like, "It is so evil."
Yeah. You know, but now Bombers got the Clippers now. So it's all, I guess it all works out, right? Like
there you go. So my question is, you are really passionate about what you do. And clearly you are not the kind of person who could just like take a job. Like it would have to be something that like you really wanted to show up for, or you would get bored and leave immediately, right? So I also know that ethics, morality, all of those things, super important to you. I appreciate your yard art that is around the like Black Lives Matter, we believe in science, et cetera, et cetera. I keep forgetting to order my flag, but yeah, same, right? So my question is, you work for hyperglobal megacorp, potentially big evil, who has a terrible reputation right now for burnouts, a terrible reputation for treating staff, both the higher skilled, like technical stuff and that sort of thing, and especially like their warehouse staff and all of the stuff that they're doing about union busting, etc. How do you reconcile all of those parts of you?
it's tough, right? Like, I mean, I would say like, even when there was all the stuff happening with the unionizing workers in Alabama, or was it Georgia?
I don't remember, but yeah,
it was,
that place.
There was a lot happening with that. And, you know, because I haven't worked in the warehouse, right? I don't know, right? There's so much I don't know. Like at Amazon, I think the last time I checked was like about 1 million people, right? It's massive, right? It's probably 1.2 million now. I think in customer service alone, we have like 120,000 customer service agents, right? So it's so massive, right? It's hard for me to say like, is it like, how bad is it really, right? But I will say that like, it's hard for me to make an opinion because I don't know the truth, right? Like you hear on one side, like the argument, like, you know, great health insurance, like, you know, great pay. On the other side, you hear like the horror stories of like what people have to do to make their numbers. And I think somewhere in the middle, like I just don't know enough, right? Like I'm just kind of like trying to like eke out my existence in my one little area of it. But I will say it's definitely a big challenge that like they need to overcome, right? It's something that is going to impact the company for a long time, right? Getting that right? Treating workers how they should be treated, giving people opportunity, right? Just all the things that you hear. So I do think like there's been a lot of progress made, at least from the corporate side. So let's take the warehouse workers and the drivers out of it for a second, because that's somewhat far removed from where I'm at. But you heard the NY Times story about like people breaking down at their desk and crying and being berated by bosses. And interesting, one ex-Amazon person had come and taken a CTO position at Bazaar Voice when I had joined. And he would do these meetings at like 8 a.m. where he would literally just yell at everybody, right? He eventually got let go pretty quick, right? And this is right around the time we had IPO'd. So we were Bazaar Voice, we were growing, we IPO'd, and he had a very bad reputation, right? Because and that's what I had thought about Amazon for a long time. But what I will say is when I've come into Amazon, I think they've done a lot to reduce or get rid of that culture in the corporate side. So a lot of the leaders that I've worked with, right, have been super empathetic, have been caring, have been like trying to flip that narrative, which with actual like good intention, not just good intentions, but good actions to show that they're not that company. And I think Amazon was maybe rated number 1 or 2 for one of these lists on like, you know, best companies to work for. So they had done some work on that.
Deven, come on.
I'm
You
just
know
saying
how
that,
those lists get made, right?
yeah, I agree. I'm just saying, like, so what I'm
So
trying
they wrote a check.
but it was the progress, right? That you can't write a check big enough if you're that bad, right?
Incorrect.
No, like I like to say there comes a point where your problems get bigger than your capability to write checks to it, right? So
I mean, yeah. So I know people who are at Amazon and cry at their desk every day. Or I mean, not their desk, but like their home office every day. I know people who have left Amazon because it was so awful, some of whom have PTSD symptoms from having been there. It makes it really, which is why when I heard that you're going to work for Amazon, I was like Amazon? You're not an unintelligent man. This is surprising. So how, like, what have, I guess, first of all, like, have you had any of those experiences? And it's a giant company. So the experience that one person has in the exact same job title in one area could be night and day from the experience in a different area. So have you had any of those experiences where you thought, oh shit, now it begins? And I guess what are the biggest sprouts of hope for Amazon that you have seen?
So I have not had any of those experiences, right? I've been, like I said, super lucky, right? Knock on wood, right?
You're just too damn likable. Who could shout at you?
No. This is all luck, totally luck, right? Because I have a friend who started after me, right? He landed in AWS somewhere, and he has much more similar experience to what you're talking about. So, and I've heard from other people too, right? So like, I know it's happening, right? And I don't know how to solve it, right? I'm just like this piece of it, but I will say that it is definitely very manager, VP, or org dependent, right? Which is, but to the sprout of hope that to come to what you're asking is that I'm seeing more and more where they've done work at that either like the VP, senior VP, director level to kind of like combat some of that negative, you know, not only press but negative like the actions that they've seen, right? So I think they're trying, right? But they're so big it takes time.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it doesn't exist, right? Because I definitely have heard the horror stories firsthand too, right? So I guess in some ways, right, it's Amazon's a jungle, and you're kind of like, you know, in many ways, it goes back to like, how do you find your tribe or the group that you connect with? for me, for a long time, it was like, you know, for whatever reasons, I had to move to different cities, this and that. So it's hard. Like I was disconnected from, you know, the people that I loved running startups with, or, you know, and to find that at a bigger company, especially remotely, has been kind of like a windfall, a very like, you know, serendipitous kind of thing. But I don't think it happens all the time. So I'm not going to say it does. I think a lot of it is just like luck.
Does it get talked about? Like, does it get acknowledged in like official communications and trainings? Like, guys, we have this reputation. You've been hired as a manager. Please don't make people cry and be an asshole. Like, is that a thing? Is it like a ready acknowledgement within the organization that this is a problem?
I think it has been acknowledged, and I know there's training on it, right? And I know there's a lot of emphasis
How
on
to
it.
make your employees cry and cower.
Yeah,
Step
right.
one.
Yeah, step one. Step two, there's definitely stuff that they do, but like, you know, some of that training, right? It's like, I've come to realize that you don't change people, right? People are who they're going to be, right? You could do training till you're blue in the face, but if you're like, this is the way you are. So I think it takes time to like slowly change the culture by hiring. Like that's where they keep adding some more of these leadership principles and trying to focus on them when they're hiring.
Yeah.
To weed out maybe the more, you know, type A psychopath type people that are going to make other people cry versus
not all type A's are psychopaths. Some of us are very well adjusted.
No, all the things. Yes, all the pieces. Type A plus psychopath plus.
Okay.
You know, it's got to be, because there are definitely, like you said, type A, very empathetic people too.
Sure.
But I think it takes a while to like changing a culture is so hard at a bigger company too. So I don't know like if when they're gonna be like claim success and say we fixed it, right? Maybe there's never, because I also know people like Google or Facebook that face the same, right? So
absolutely,
I don't think there's any way, right? I think Amazon got like definitely a bad reputation for it, probably likely so, because they had a lot more people and a lot more people experienced it, but it's at a lot of these big places.
And I think that like as you were saying, I think that Amazon's issues with the warehousing stuff and that sort of thing, which is so far removed from the world that you work in at Amazon. Like, I think a lot of the problems are there and are just scale issues. But that a lot of that kind of all gets amalgamated into their bad reputation in some ways.
But I'm doing an not investigative piece, but I will say like my son, he's been wanting to like, you know, hey dad, how do we make some money? Right. So I told him, I was like, if we maybe get electric vehicle, I was like, let's go deliver some packages. So I'm definitely going to like sign up to be one of those flex drivers one of these days, just to try it. Right.
Okay.
Cool. And I will find out what it's like to be actually on the front lines, just to try it out. Right.
I'm so surprised that that's the direction you went, rather than like just knowing your son, like having him write some children's books and like Kindle publishing. You know what, Betty? Make up a story for your little sister, illustrate it. We'll scan that in, get you a Kindle copy. We'll see if people buy it. You don't know, he could win all kinds of awards. He could be the next great children's author. I can see it now.
True. But you know, that's like a wish, right? The flex driving is guaranteed, right? And I've been really like digging like being in Texas, I was like, I feel like I want to get an electric truck, right? So the Ford F-150. So I was trying to sell it to him and the family, be like, hey, if we get this, we could do some like Amazon package delivery.
Okay, so really all of this is a ploy for you to get a new expensive vehicle. That's what I heard. Okay, now I'm back on your wife's side. No,
yeah. Think of all the things you could do with it, right?
So we are almost out of time. What have I not asked you that I should have asked you?
I don't know. I feel like, I'd have to go back and watch the recording, but I don't know. What are your clients? Okay, let me ask you this. What are the few pieces of advice I can give for the clients that are looking to get into product management? Because I think that's the big area, right? Like you probably have clients, or if that's not the big problem, maybe something else.
No, that's a great question. Go ahead, answer.
Right? Like I think to get into product management, I think the key is to show a willingness to like have the customer empathy, but also to build something and launch it, right? Like I've known a lot of folks that have launched. There was one guy, I remember when the iOS, first came out, and he didn't know any coding, but he like created some stupid game where he could race horses or something like that. But he did it, right? He found some like, and that kind of stuff I think carries a lot of weight when you're trying to break into a new field, right? Like, how did you find a problem, launch something and address it, right? So I think that's one area that I like to like tell folks is like, there's so many problems that all of us face, right? And figuring out how to create a solution around it is, I the most important thing about like break product management. But then there's other things too, right? Like I think like product management, there's all these pillars around it, right? Like if you can figure out a specialty, right, whether it's UX or data science or the business acumen or the tech side, having that strength coming in also helps. So those are kind of two broad areas I like to tell folks is if your background is coming from, user experience or marketing, how do you use that along with this willingness to build stuff to kind of break into product management? So
that was a great answer and a great question. So thank you. The only thing I hadn't asked you yet that I ask absolutely everybody, how do you answer when people ask you how much you make?
Oh, easy. I say Amazon doesn't pay anybody more than 155K. Done. We're capped. Nobody makes more than that.
Okay.
But that's true, right? Like we're capped at that, right? Everything, after that is maybe stock, maybe something, but yeah, nobody makes more than that.
There you go. I had a very fair answer. It is at that. So with all of that having been said, thank you so much for your time. This has been delightful and I think really informative for folks. So I really appreciate you. Thanks, Deven.
For sure. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job. For more information on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta for more insider information. Soon, you'll be hearing us say, I'm Michelle Olivier, and hey, I want your job.